west of 35W, right along Lake Street.
So how can, you have to wonder, how can the fire department get to these? What is their order of priority?
Yeah, safety would be the first priority that they have,
Oh, it's just so weird to see the fireworks going off.
Kevin, you may be correct about that with safety, and that may be the one reason why the first fire they're addressing is furthest away from the 5th precinct and all of the groups of people. And also, it's in a more commercialized area. The flames are also quite large in here. I think they were concerned about it spreading to neighboring buildings because the buildings are closer together, more congested in that spot, but further away from the group of protesters. So you may have hit that one right on the head. Back to you.
That makes sense.
It does.
Put the fires out on the perimeter before you get into the epicenter.
In the middle of all of it.
Where it's all going on.
How does it appear to you these fires are getting started? Can you tell?
That's really difficult. Earlier today, over by Hiawatha, we watched a fire blaze. Smoke was billowing out of the building, and we saw a group of 5 or 6 people pull up in a car, and they were trying to break in to an industrial warehouse that was right next door to it. But that was all sealed with steel garage doors, so they failed at that. But, it's you almost wonder at this point if they set the fires as a diversion to go loot somewhere else, something of greater value.
Especially when they're doing it at these such different areas in this area, this community, so they can pull people from one spot, try to get them away from there. But here we are at another area of heavy police presence.
And, last night, Chief Todd Axtell described one of the problems they were having is that groups of vehicles were driving around without license plates on, getting out and looting and starting fires.
I see police cars, but I don't see a fire.
In that area, we could see flames, but we definitely saw a lot of smoke and police. And you have to keep in mind when we're looking at this chopper video, you're so high. It's hard to really get perspective of how big the fire is and what type of buildings are.
And there's the fire over east of Hiawatha.
Yeah, Kevin, are you still there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, just to give you and your viewers an idea of why we're where we are. The area below us, the airspace below us in South Minneapolis, is closed to commercial traffic. Below me are state troopers, air units, and National Guard helicopters. So that explains the reason why we're up as high as we are. Fortunately, the helicopter is equipped with a camera system capable of at least pulling the pictures in to give you what you've got right now. But aside from the curfew that they have in Minneapolis and St. Paul, the airspace in South Minneapolis is closed as well to commercial traffic.
Ken, you know a lot of other pilots, military as well. What the National Guard helicopter pilot or helicopters, what would their role be here right now?
If they were, they're operating below me. Some of them were flying as low as just 100 feet above the rooftops. I think it's surveillance, intelligence gathering, and reconnaissance. I believe they're just trying to lay out and prioritize what's going on down on the ground and relay that to the foot soldiers and the commanders that are in the Humvees. It's tactical in nature, the operation that they're doing. So, and when they were flying in kind of a what I call a cornrow methodology. They would fly north to south, and then like transect lines, they'd sidestep over and go north, and then directly south, and then north and south. So they're kind of canvassing an area and gathering information that way. But that's all happening below me with the assistance of the State Patrol, which has a number of helicopters in their air unit. Back to you.
That makes sense that the national, because they refer to missions is how they work, and they are approaching this as a military mission as they would anything else that they do.
That's right, and they said today that they needed their orders and they needed to show up and know what they were doing. And this one getting a lot of water sprayed at this point, but it is a big, full, heavy fire that we're looking at.
It is.
Not much left of this location.
The National Guard, Colonel Simon Schaefer, Joint Chief of Staff, when I asked him about the mission, and he says one of their primary missions was to escort police officers and firefighters into areas that are dangerous so they would be safe to do their jobs. And that's what we're seeing right now below us, at least with this large warehouse that is on fire. The roof is fully engulfed. They're attacking it with three hose lines that I see right there, ladder truck on scene, dropping more water in from the top. And as you can see, there are buildings next to this. I'm sure the hope is that they can keep this from spreading down the block.
You can see how many are just so close, and it looks like there are several businesses right within the strip.
And we want you to know that as we watch the firefighters do their best to keep this fire from spreading, that there are rioters in the streets confronting State Patrol who are trying to set up a barrier around the 5th Police Precinct, which we spent so much time outside of earlier this evening. And then there's also the demonstrators who shut down 35W.
Right.
None of these people, recognizing there's a curfew, that definitely did not work to keep.
It did not. It kept some people home.
Yeah.
They weren't going to be out there to start with. You know, Kevin, right around 10 o'clock when we started Nightcast, we were really having to work to find these scenes. And we were thinking, this isn't matching what we're hearing is going on. And all of these fires just started happening so fast, and they were so spread out. And it really did happen so fast that we realized Precinct 5 was in a very bad situation. When you saw that looting right there at the Shop and Go, and then when you started seeing the ATM getting pulled out from that Wells Fargo, and of course now we know, we're being told that Wells Fargo now in flames, along with that post office right there near Precinct 5. All of this, you know, in a remotely close area. And think about when we woke up yesterday morning now, and you saw overnight that there was just so much destruction, so much fire, but there was nothing like waking up and seeing what was left and what it was actually like. And then to see the community come together and clean up and join forces to try to make it better after a night of just pure chaos and destruction. We're going to do it all over again tomorrow. And right now at 1 o'clock, there's so much more time in the night for more to burn.
And Governor Walz has just confirmed in a tweet that he will speak to the state at 1:30 and address Minnesotans and take questions from reporters. We will bring that to you live. And it appears to me that that looks like law enforcement setting up a perimeter, a corridor, if you would say so. Fire trucks can get through quickly. And
this was that plan that the assistant chief was telling us
yeah,
about.
Yeah.
They had to be able to get in there safely, and they're getting to areas that are not full of these people protesting and who will get in their way.
Yeah. Brian Tyner, the assistant fire chief in Minneapolis, was on with us earlier, if you're just joining us. And he did say it was just simply too dangerous to get in close. And he laid out that they are going to respond to every fire. It's just a matter of making it safe so they can do their jobs. And indeed, this is what we're seeing right now. It took time to establish the perimeter so firefighters could get in there and work. And as we just looked from Chopper 5 a few moments ago, it's more than half a dozen fires burning right now.
Right.
And
they look small from Chopper 5, but they're not, and they're often very close to other buildings. When we do hear from the governor, again, we expect that to be around 1:30, it'll be interesting to hear what he says about the Pentagon's suggestion of having personnel ready to send to Minnesota, because we are hearing from our Tom Hauser that the governor's office is saying it's a numbers issue. So if the Pentagon is saying, we have the people, we can send them in there, we can hopefully get control, what does the governor then do with that? Because you have to know that he doesn't want law enforcement from outside of Minnesota. Minnesota, you know, in here in a 10th time. He doesn't want to make it worse, but what options are there?
He did say Minnesota will take care of this. And, you know, I'm glad you brought that up because we have received a few emails from viewers questioning why are we talking about there's not enough police officers in law enforcement. Well, the governor addressed that. That's why we brought up, and earlier tonight, the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, which is the largest association in the state of Minnesota, recognizing police officers and deputies across the state. They say, you know, they don't have Minnesota. Law enforcement does not have the resources to respond to something like this. They are saying they need more law enforcement. And as political as that may sound with budgets and things, then the president offering to help by sending troops in, saying that the Associated Press reporting that there are troops ready to deploy from Fort Bragg in 4 hours, and it would not take them long to get to Minnesota.
And that may already be in course at this point.
We don't know.
We just don't know, and we won't know until 1:30. And as much as I know the governor said he wanted to fix this as Minnesotans, how many more nights of this can go on? What we're hearing from the governor's office to our town houses that this is a numbers issue. If you just don't have the number of people to handle all of these people on the ground protesting, rioting, setting fires at once, not only Minnesotans, but we're hearing many people from different areas coming in on buses, caravans, coming into the area. How long does it go on?
This is going to go on for a long time, and it's going to be a slow, methodical process. It will be, first of all, establishing safe areas so firefighters can do their work around these fires. They will get to every fire. It's a question of how fast and when. And then there's the issue around the 5th Police Precinct, which there is a standoff there between State Patrol members who've been bussed in, hundreds of them, to try and take control. And we saw them dressed in riot gear. And then there's the rioters just down Nicollet Avenue who keep setting up these barriers, these burning barriers that as the state troopers move forward, they established another barrier and they started on fire. The rioters breaking the law tonight and causing all this property damage are well prepared.
Well prepared. There's a plan in place, and it seems that way every night. For example, we were watching those who were marching all day. Well, those marchers would set off in different directions. Those different directions, some went to Precinct 5. It really made it difficult to follow. And now
we just saw, it looks like a wall come down.
And that is why it is so dangerous. And these firefighters know it.
There's another part of the wall collapsing.
And they are very close to that building.
And you'll notice, though, they're fighting this from trucks and at a distance. And now that the smoke is cleared a bit there, you can see the building collapse there. And
they're doing their best to save these other buildings, but the heat is so strong. I'm trying to see what that looks like. A Boost. I think Boost is a cell phone company. Just a bunch of.
It's hard to tell what's next to that, because that industrial complex appears to have a whole bunch of garages there.
We are getting questions also through email about other areas. Are there fires in other areas? And our producers can hopefully, give us those updates. We've got, obviously everyone has their hands full in Minneapolis right now, but we know if you're in St. Paul and you're a resident there, you're concerned. I'm having people asking, what about other suburbs? Are they having issues? And my producer, Alan, is telling me that at this point, he has not seen anything in St. Paul. So we hope that is accurate. Looting, we don't know. It could be going on. Right. Fires, we do not know of any fires in St. Paul right now. And extended, it seems that hands are just full right now in Minneapolis. And if there are fires in other areas, we aren't hearing about them right now.
Of course, earlier in the week, the damage was controlled to an area around the 3rd Police Precinct, on East Lake Street in Minneapolis. There was the Minnehaha Center, the shopping center where the Target was looted, the Dollar Tree, all the stores in that plaza, the grocery store, and then right across the street, the Auto Zone burned, which was right across the street from 3rd Police Precinct, which burned, but more of a concentrated area. And then last night in St. Paul, it was very spread out.
Yes.
It was the Hamlin Midway area, and then later in the evening, it was more like Snelling University, and
then to wake up and see the destruction from that this morning.
And so tonight it's spread out in Minneapolis. It's not in the one concentrated area. It's spread out around the 5th Police Precinct, and firefighters are doing their best to get it under control, to keep people safe, to protect people and property. And
as soon as the sun comes up, you're going to have these business owners driving up, trying to see what's left. No doubt right now watching this on live TV and wondering what will happen.
And Lindsay, one viewer just emailed me what he's asking us to ask all of our viewers to pray for those first responders on the ground there tonight.
Absolutely.
Putting their lives on the line.
That smoke.
Keep everybody safe.
Smoke, the crumbling building, the heat. We do owe them so much gratitude. And honestly, to be put in a position where they didn't quite, if they could have, I'm sure these firefighters would like to have been there as early as they could have to prevent the fire from becoming worse, but they're stuck in this situation. It's such a bad situation.
It's impossible to pick out what possible targets,
impossible.
By the rioters. And our Callan Gray is on the telephone as we're watching firefighters do their best to control damage in South Minneapolis. Callan, you have been with these demonstrators who walked out onto 35W. What are you seeing right now?
So we left the 35W scene to meet with them where they were heading, and that was Dinkytown, as it turned out. So they exited off the University Avenue exit from 35W North and headed down University into Dinkytown. We caught up with them as they arrived just up the entrance of the University of Minnesota campus, and then at 15th, if you know where that is, and then they turned right there, headed down 15th, and then now we once again are trying to catch up with them. This group is moving extremely quickly. We will see them, and then in 2 minutes they will have passed. But we know right now that they are in the Dinkytown area.
Callan, has that group still not caused damage? They're not.
So they have.
They're not damaging property.
So what they have told us is they are not the group that is doing the looting or the vandalism to the extreme level that we have seen in other areas. I will say that as we traveled with them from the very beginning, when they left US Bank Stadium just before 8 o'clock, we did see some individuals, a handful, spray painting on the boarded up businesses that we passed, some on some sites of businesses. We did see this group, some individuals, again, it's just a handful, vandalize the government sign. So there has been spray paint used, but the majority of the people in this group are not doing that. It's a couple of individuals, and something that we noticed just when we stopped to get out, we're trying to show you a live picture when they arrived in town, but we were unable to. And something that happened there is there was an individual on a motorcycle who was driving up and down, and someone was yelling after them, "Hey, this is an agitator." So we're not entirely sure who all is in this group, because the individuals that we have talked to have said, we're peaceful. But then when we were on 35W southbound earlier in the night, and we saw the fires and we saw the fireworks, we heard again then some of the individuals in this group saying, "Hey, those are the people that were causing trouble." So it seems like there are some people that are trying to catch up with this group and are, maybe have different intentions in mind, because the majority of the people who are in this group of marchers, they are marching specifically for peace. You heard earlier the one young man say, "This march, we are about love," and we heard that from a couple of different people. So I think that there are some individuals, and we saw some individuals vandalizing some businesses with spray paint
and everything for that
the
point.
UPS truck, yep, and that fire that you saw
Right.
on 35W, but it is not everyone. And I would say the majority of people are not doing those things.
And we've been following this group since, I want to say they got together at noon. I know you haven't been there. You split in, I think, about maybe 3. Our Christian Swanson was with them in the beginning. And all day through our newscast, with this specific group we're talking about of marchers, we've had a reporter in that group walking with them. So we were able to see what was going on. And really there was this sign holding, chanting. As the evening got later, that group did seem to splinter off a bit and people joined the group. But you make some really good points there, Callan, about just how the day unfolds and what starts as one thing can change.
And I want to say one more thing about that. We had followed a group on the 35W, right? And we were with them for a little bit, but then we broke off from them for our own safety just because of the situation, walking along a highway. And so they continued on, and another group stayed back, and that was the group that did the fires. Now, the group that we have reconnected with about 2 hours ago, that was the group that had carried on. So these people that are marchers, are not necessarily the same ones that were at the 35W fire either. We know that some people have probably re-linked up, done a whole group leave, but there's a couple of different groups within this larger group.
Right, exactly, and that's what we were able to see when we started seeing all of this splitting off. Callan, thank you so much for all of this good information you've been bringing us and for staying ahead and staying with what's been going on throughout the afternoon, because it's like you said, it's hard to keep up. They're moving so fast.
Lindsay, once again, our viewers are helping us tell this story. A viewer tells me he believes this building is at the corner of Lake and Columbus, and it is many, many businesses close together. He recognized a mural on the side of the building earlier. I can't confirm that, but he sent me a picture, and it certainly looks like that building.
But he says it is what now?
At the corner of Columbus and Lake. And so just to give us some perspective at the fires, different fires we are looking at. And now we're panning over to, this is, I believe this is the fire east of Hiawatha. Ken Melchior, if you can hear me, it's Kevin. Is this the fire east of Hiawatha?
No, it's still west of Hiawatha along Lake Street, but east of 35.
Okay.
This is the one you were looking at earlier, where the National Guard Humvees came up with the police and created an area of security for the firefighters to come in. So it's that one. We've also noticed, up here at nearly 4,000 feet on an absolutely clear night, Chopper 5 has kind of become the city's tallest watchtower, looking across the city skyline after hearing you and Lindsay discuss about other suburbs or neighborhoods that could be affected by looting and burning and other mayhem and chaos. I have been scanning the city skyline, and everything north of downtown Minneapolis appears to be quiet. One of the cues that I get is I see patrol cars with the lights on speeding down roads, and they have not been traveling alone. They're usually traveling in groups of 3 to 6 cars at a time. And I haven't seen anything now for quite a while, both west of downtown, north of downtown, and east of downtown.
Well, Ken, our viewers will be happy to hear that and just to get that update from you. We also are hearing from some viewers who really wish they could know exactly what buildings these are that are on fire. And Ken, I know you can understand that it's quite difficult to know what these buildings are. You can try to look at these businesses and try to find cross streets, but when you're looking from an aerial distance like this and the building that you're trying to figure out is on fire, it can be difficult, but I assure you we are trying to let you know exactly where this is. There are just so many of these fires popping up so fast and getting out of control.
Yes, we would encourage viewers to email or call in if any of the visual cues that you see on the ground next to the burning building, if you have some recognition of what that might be, it certainly will help out. There's no way we're going to get anywhere near that on the ground, and with the cover of darkness and from our altitude, there's just not enough visual information to figure that out. We may not even know until tomorrow morning.
And to the viewer who emailed me asking that, I just want you to know if we could give you that exact information, we would, because we want it to make sense to you, and we want you to know what our community is really dealing with. We just can't quite place it. Now, Ken, we're going to hold with you just for a second. Our Anna Lastra, she's been with us near the 5th Precinct all night. That has been a very intense area. Anna, what's going on now?
We're actually on the porch of a neighbor who's right by the 5th Precinct. And what you're seeing right now is there's the police lights that are shining in the alley. They're really keeping people away. So if anyone's walking by the 5th Precinct or driving by, they shine the light right on them. Or I've seen like flashlights where they're just kind of flash or whatever. And so at the top of the rooftop, you can see folks or the police officers. I'm not sure if they're police officers or National Guard or state troopers. We've heard that all three are around here. But you can see them on the top of the 5th Precinct, a similar position that they were on earlier today. But now with all the fires burning around the area, you can actually see them silhouetted against it. I know there's a light kind of directly hitting the lens, but right behind it you can see the water from what I believe is a fire truck shooting down onto the flames that were the buildings that were set on fire earlier today after the demonstrations broke up into what appears to be, these fire settings and things like that. But yeah, it's relatively calm in this neighborhood. We can hear distant popping in the area, I'm assuming just from protesters and police officers or whoever's out there just meeting. But we're just relatively far away from that, just behind the 5th Precinct. Lindsay?
Yeah. Kevin?
No, I was just going to say, you referred to that fire, and that's the one with the Wells Fargo Bank and the post office, and I believe there was another business in there. They've all been burned. Do you see the state troopers gaining a hand on the demonstrators? Earlier, our Crystal Bowie was on the other side from where you are, and she reports that they were backing up and setting new fires. Do you have any perspective on that at all?
Kevin, because of the location we're at, we can't see what state troopers or National Guard members or police officers are doing beyond what you can see in this shot. Earlier today, we were in the middle of it as, folks are starting to set fires to building or going into the buildings to steal items and loot. So earlier today, we did see the clash between State Patrol initially firing off the tear gas canisters and things like that. But we have not been able to get back inside because as we would walk along the street to try and find a good vantage point for you guys to get a perspective of what's going on, we would run into police officers who would tell us to get back, get away. Most of these officers were along I believe the vans or the large vehicles that were transporting officers in and out of the area. So I don't know what's going on between
and what we're hearing right now.
They're popping something off at people. So there was a group of kids out by there, and so they were just trying to distract kids from getting in the area.
Okay.
Anna, hold for 1 second. I know we need to explain something.
A few moments ago, you saw a photographer from Fox 9 actually pop up on our screen, and that's in preparation for the governor's upcoming news conference at 1:30. Fox is providing a pool feed, especially recently during the COVID-19 separation, that local media has been cooperating in this way. For example, earlier today, we shared the news conference with the governor and the public safety commissioner. And again, I've been told now that at 1:30 it'll be Governor Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey speaking and taking questions about what you are watching right now. And we have been reporting on for the last many hours that there are, according to a best guess from chopper pilot Ken Melchior, more than a half dozen fires burning in South Minneapolis. And it took quite a while for firefighters to get in there, but that's just because it was not safe. They were ready to go. There are rioters and looters outside the police precinct, and they're in a confrontation right now with police. They're trying to set up a barrier there, and the governor and the mayor will be speaking about this in about 6 minutes.
And it's going to be a very interesting dynamic, because when we heard from the governor earlier today, it was the governor and state leaders, and there really was this dynamic from the governor of, hey, this was a city issue. We were waiting for the city to tell us what they needed. Mayor Fry was not at that press conference with the governor. So now at 1:30, when we will hear from Mayor Fry and the governor to talk about the fact that regardless of what the plan was and where the lack of communication was, this has to get solved.
And also, I'll be very interested to hear what they have to say about the president's offer to send in military police units from Fort Bragg in North Carolina and also Fort Drum in New York, two of the Army's largest bases in the country. And according to the Associated Press, they are ready to leave within 4 hours' notice. We don't know if that's already happening. If that's the case, they could be here by sunrise. It's a very rare move, though, for the Pentagon to offer these services to local agents.
Rare move, and we will see if that happens. Today has been a very long day. We know, you all know, everyone woke up today to see the destruction from the rioting and the fires last night. We heard a press conference from the governor. During that press conference, we were told that there could be an announcement coming later within the day. We were told then by County Attorney Mike Freeman, it must have been around 1:30, that charges had been filed against the police officer that was seen putting his knee against George Floyd's neck. That was third-degree murder and manslaughter. And that was an announcement that County Attorney Freeman says was the fastest he has made against a police officer ever. And he says that he is still investigating. There could be more charges. And so ever since that announcement was made, we've seen these protests throughout the day. There have been marches. We've been following them throughout the day. It was really within the 10 o'clock hour that you could see that the protesting and what then had become some rioting, but it was nothing like it was the night before.
It definitely escalated.
But it escalated very fast within the 10 o'clock hour, to the point where you would see the looting and then you'd see a fire. You'd see the looting and you'd see the fire. For example, last night we were watching and you would see different ways that fire was being propelled at buildings. So not necessarily someone in the building. So that's why I was talking earlier, and I was asking Kim Melchior exactly how these fires are being started, because it's not necessarily every time that someone is in the building.
And Ken said that he himself witnessed at least one vehicle, one car driving up, going to a building, trying to break in, and when they couldn't get in the metal doors, then they broke through a building next door and started a fire. And yesterday in St. Paul, the police chief, Todd Axtell, said they noticed the same thing there. Vehicles without license plates driving around, stopping, burning, and stealing. And these are just gangs of criminals running around, causing property damage and stealing. And there's more okay, it's good. You know, it's good to see the flashing lights. It's a sign that they're creating a space for firefighters to be safe, to get in and put these fires out one at a time.
And you know, the firefighters all day they've wanted to be safe. They didn't want to get in danger, but they wanted to get this stopped, and they wanted to save these buildings. And some of these buildings actually are very close to homes. I'm getting emails from many people who are saying, yes, I know that these are buildings and you're talking about businesses, and sure, that's sad, but they're very close to homes and neighborhoods. And that's difficult to tell in these chopper shots in the dark. And that is just another level to the tragedy that we're seeing right here. A tragedy beyond measure.
And one of the more stunning images today was also the booking photo, the mug shot, former police officer Derek Chauvin, who is tonight behind bars. We had Steve Slisher, on a former federal prosecutor, on earlier today, and he was saying that as far as the court appearance goes, he expects that Chauvin will make his first court appearance at the latest, because there's a deadline on these things, Monday midday sometime.
Right, and Slisher was saying he was actually surprised by how fast these charges were announced, because normally it can take, as we've seen in our history here in Minnesota, it can take a long time to come up with charges, especially when you're dealing with a police officer. He says he was blown away that those charges came out today. Fascinating.
Yeah. So again, if you're with us, coming up in a few moments, we do expect Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey to speak to the state and comment on what's happening here in South Minneapolis tonight. We're all set and ready to go. We're just waiting for when the governor and the mayor will speak. Well, as we watch this fire from Chopper 5 here, one note is that pilot Ken Melchior has the highest viewpoint in the Twin Cities tonight. He's about 4,000 feet over that. And he looks around and he doesn't see flames to the north or over St. Paul. Again, he's not right overhead, but he is high enough to get a good viewpoint. And so right now in South Minneapolis, firefighters definitely have their hands full, though. We can count at least a half dozen fires actively burning.
We can, and we are looking at the clock. It's 1:30. We do know at any point now we will be hearing from the governor. We're also told Minneapolis Mayor Frey. Yeah, I have to think of the fiance George Floyd's fiance,
Courtney Ross.
Courtney Ross, right. Today, when she found out that charges had been announced and this officer had been arrested, she fell to the ground. She was so relieved, but she wanted to make sure she told our Eric Shalou that her fiance would want peace. And he would want them to fight for everything they believed in. But he would never, she said, want to see this kind of destruction. She says that he moved to Minnesota, to Minneapolis, that George did from Houston, and just loved this area. And she said for him to see this level of destruction, seemingly by some saying in his name, would just be awful. And you have to hope that that message really could mean something to the people who say they are doing this in the name of George Floyd.
And we were very hopeful that that was the case and that people were listening. We talked about it on our 9 o'clock news, Eyewitness News on 45, that it had been a day of less violence, and that as the curfew approached, we did see people leave the 3rd precinct. But as darkness fell and there was protection, the rioters, the criminals came out, and the buildings started to burn, and they started to steal from businesses.
I'm hearing a little bit more about some law enforcement presence in the area. Actually, now we're hearing from Governor Walz. Let's go ahead, take a listen.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Minnesota. Minnesota National Guard, under the command of General John Jensen, is deployed. We'll talk about the numbers that are out there and the mission specific that they're employing. Colonel Langer is currently at the 5th precinct, holding that ground with the State Patrol. DPS and the folks with under DNR are out there, and our local partners in Minneapolis and St. Paul and our joint powers agreements are assisting. The situation is incredibly dangerous. The situation is fluid. It is dynamic. I would first of all thank all Minnesotans who chose to protect our cities, who chose to protect their neighbors and stay home. Thank you for that. To all of the first responders who are out there, from firefighters to National Guard, to line crews, to utilities workers who are out there to keep us safe, I want to thank you for that. Law enforcement is responding to the best they can in this situation. We'll get you all of the numbers that are out there. I want to say, first of all, I myself can fully understand the rage I spoke this evening to George Floyd's siblings quite extensively. I understand that rage. We've talked about it. We understand what has to happen. What's going on out there right now is not that. The wanton destruction, and specifically of ethnic businesses that took generations to build, are being torn down. All of those infrastructures of civil society and the things that make our city great, which lends me to believe as we look at this, the disenfranchisement that went with what we witnessed with George's death is one thing, but the absolute chaos. This is not grieving, and this is not making a statement that we fully acknowledge needs to be fixed. This is life-threatening, dangerous to the most well-qualified forces that are out there facing this. So I want to acknowledge that. I'm deeply concerned with the people who you need to go home. You need to go home. The purpose of this, and we're seeing it spread up across the country, is making it more difficult to get to the point where we can deal with these issues. Our neighbors are afraid. People are watching this across there, and they want to know what's happening. We promised you today, and I want to thank Mayor Fry for the leadership today, and I think the issue of coordination and communicating together. This is the largest civilian deployment in Minnesota history that we have out there today. And quite candidly, right now, we do not have the numbers. We cannot arrest people when we're trying to hold ground because of the sheer size, the dynamics, and the wanton violence that's coming out there. Colonel Langer spoke about this often, of seasoned folks who have also deployed overseas and seen this, and now seeing this here in our neighborhoods. We will talk about ways and the resources that we have left, but to put this into perspective, the force that we have out there now is about 3 times larger than the one in the 60s, which was the largest during the race riots, and they're out there right now. And the capacity to be able to do offensive actions, and they're out there doing that, arresting the best of the folks that we can. But as you've seen, there's already shots being fired back at our people. This arson that is taking place puts many people at risk. Our firefighters are specifically and very open to target, and Minneapolis Fire has been responding heroically. And I tell you all the citizens, the response time is fast as we want to get it. And that responsibility, as I said today, for coordination lies with us. I will take responsibility for the underestimating the wanton destruction and the size of this crowd. We have deployed a force that I think, as we sat down together and talked about, would have been any other civilian military or civilian police operation work. But the terrifying thing is to hear people who've seen this, and myself of looking at this, it resembles more of a military operation at times now, as especially ringleaders moving from place to place. So I would ask all of us to, again, go home to protect our assets, understanding that the priority of this mission today and the plan to do it was to deploy the assets that we had, to work in coordination and beef up what we had to do very, very quickly in command and control of those, put a joint force together to first and foremost protect life, followed by protecting property, followed by restoring order. And the issue, as I've said this time and time again, whether it was something that now seems so simple to do stay-at-home orders about COVID, is to try and get the situation under control to protect all those things. But there is a compact that goes in civilized society that you have to have social buy-in. And so with the elements that are out there now, they're stopping semis by blocking roads and then raiding what's in them. This is not about George's death. This is not about inequities that were real. This is about chaos being caused. And so my responsibility on this, and I do want to thank the mayor. Executing a plan is very difficult, and I think the frustrations we all feel certainly isn't aimed at the mayor. He's performing admirably and doing everything possible. I accept that responsibility. He's here today asking and calling hourly, where can we move, how do we coordinate? So Mayor Fry, I want to thank you. The same thing with Mayor Carter of executing together. This is an operation that has never been done in Minnesota. The scope of this has now reached globally, or across the nation. We were in contact today and had an extensive conversation, General Jensen, Commissioner Harrington and I, with the Secretary of Defense and General Milley, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to talk about assets and way that we can help to assess the situation as they're seeing it on the ground and to put those things into a plan to operate today. That plan is not changing. Our folks are out there as we speak right now doing this. Our intention is still to do those very same things, protect the lives of Minnesotans. to try and protect as much property as we can and try to restore order on the streets. I have to do that in a way that protects those who are out there doing that, to ask them to go in a forward motion to try and to get some of these people. They are well coordinated. They will flank these groups. They will do everything possible to cause that destruction. So with that being said, I'm going to have Mayor Fry come up. We'll have our folks talk about it. We'll talk about what the next steps are, because I want to be clear, we're about 72 hours into this. The mayor's quick action of activating the National Guard, I believe, protect as much as we could. I think now, as we think about this and we're this far into this, it seems almost impossible. It was 2 days ago from an activation. We went today of planning tonight for what tomorrow is going to look like, because I think Minnesotans need to recognize, and we clearly recognize this, what you see tonight will replicate tomorrow unless we change something in what we're doing. We changed that today in a way that was unprecedented in the amount of numbers, the execution of the plan, and the quality of the first responders who are out there. You have veterans of combat tours overseas. You have state patrol who are seasoned. You have local police and firefighters who have been doing this for decades and are the best at what they do. They're just not used to doing it where you have wanton destruction. And the challenge that we face and the challenge that the mayor faces, we have to do it with ensuring the safety of those people, ensuring that there are legitimate people who earlier want to try and express their grief. The folks who are out there right now want nothing more than entice into conflict, entice something that sets us off even further, entices our folks to get in a situation where we start to lose life. And so that adds the complexity to it. If it were as simple as just push them and move them back, that would be one thing. They cannot do that. So I want to just reiterate that Minnesotans deserve a plan to try and get this. We need to assess that with all of the tools that we have, with the experience that we've seen in this. We are certainly in contact with our neighboring states and cooperations, as well as the federal government, to think about the best way to do this. The situation tomorrow will be increasingly more difficult because this has spread to other cities in a serious way, which makes the challenge of civil order even that much more difficult. But I do want to and just clarify to my friend and someone who's led in this, and a mayor who should never be put in a position that he was put in, to try and respond. There are a limited number of resources that any city has, and this force that's out there right now bent on this is simply overwhelming what we have on the ground. And so at this point, it becomes more of a hold what we have and do the best we can. So I want to thank you, Mayor Fry. I want to thank you for basically being up for 72 hours and every minute picking up the phone and continuing to adapt to this situation. So, Mayor.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for the command and control today and the partnership. Minneapolis, I know you are reeling. Due to lack of sleep and heartbreak for seeing the events over the last couple of days, I'm reeling too. We as a city are so much more than this. We as a city can be so much better than this. There is no honor in burning down your city. There is no pride in looting local businesses that have become institutions of a neighborhood. These are institutions that people are counting on, especially during a time of pandemic. They're counting on grocery stores to get food. They're counting on pharmacies to get medicine. They're counting on their local bank to get cash. If you care about your community, you got to put this to an end. It needs to stop. You're not getting at the police officer that tragically killed George Floyd by looting a town. You're not getting back at anybody. If you have a friend or a family member that is out right now, call them, tell them to come home. It is not safe. It is not right. If we care about our city, let's do the right thing now. We are doing absolutely everything we can. Our firefighters are hauling around the city, putting out fires as quickly as they possibly can. Our police officers are doing everything to secure corridors, to make sure that the looting stops, and to try and prevent these necessary precincts which are so essential to safety. Right now, Chief Arredondo and Chief Friedel are in Minneapolis doing everything they possibly can. As I said in the beginning, I am real. And I know each and every one of you is too. Let's do right by our city. Let's do right by our community, everything they possibly can. Let's put ourselves in a position 5 and 10 years from now where we look back at this day and we recognize that this was the point where we decided to make a change. I know in my heart that we can do it because I know in my heart that Minneapolis is everything that we believe it to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. John.
Commissioner John Harrington, the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. Yesterday, we put together a unified command structure and a unified command, bringing together Minneapolis Police Department, St. Paul Police Department, Hennepin County, Ramsey County Sheriff's Department, Minnesota State Patrol, DNR, and General Jensen's men and women of the Minnesota National Guard. We created a plan that brought together one of the largest civil police forces that we have ever seen in the state of Minnesota, larger, frankly, than we had for the Republican National Convention even, with well in excess of 2,500 officers total committed to the effort of keeping the peace. We had a very clear mission. The governor was crystal clear, and the mayors have been crystal clear that our mission was to keep the peace, to maintain order, and to stop lawless behavior. By 8 o'clock last night, we began to see that we were going to have to operate on multiple different fronts of criminal behavior, with reports from St. Paul that they were actively engaged, reports that we had individuals that were breaching the Minnesota freeways around 35W, that we had crowds of in excess of 2,000 in the Lake Street area east of Hiawatha, crowds of hundreds in the area of Nicollet and Lake Street, and crowds of 1,000 or more in downtown. We reassessed the assets that we had, the personnel that we had, and redeployed to try and be as many of those as we could yet. But we recognized that we simply did not, even with the numbers that I'm talking about, have enough officers and personnel to meet all of those missions safely and successfully. We picked missions based on our capacity, and those missions focused on downtown Nicollet, and also focused on the 5th Precinct area of Nicollet and Lake. We continue to hold our critical infrastructures around other places that we believed through good intel that were being targeted and would have been destroyed, and we have continued to hold those places of critical infrastructure even as we speak. At the Nicollet and Lake area, our mobile field forces were able to rally around that area. They were able to disperse a crowd and make what I'm told is in the neighborhood of about 50 arrests. We have a mobile field force of in excess of 300, larger than the mobile field force that we utilized last night to clear the Hiawatha and East Lake Street area. and they have been actively engaged. But the level of resistance that we have seen tonight has increased exponentially. We have had officers shot at. We have had what looks to be like improvised munitions that have been targeted toward the officers. We have had officers injured. And we are continuing to push that crowd on east of Hiawatha with the attempt to try and do what we did last night, which was to move them off of the streets and to restore order there. But we recognize that as we do that, continuing to hold the area at Nicollet and Lake and try and maintain order in downtown, that we will need far more officers and far more National Guard resources than we currently have. We have created a request for the National Guard to substantially increase the number of National Guard officers that would be available. And we have reassessed our strategy in terms of our ability to mobilize mobile field forces that have been effective in moving against what is now an armed and more entrenched group of protesters, and what I would really operate and say more that they are an entrenched group of rioters. We have had officers that have been injured, none seriously at this point, but we have not given up our efforts to try and clear those streets. We will not give up our efforts to clear those streets. We are committed to restoring order in Minneapolis, helping St. Paul maintain order, and we're getting ready for what will be one of the largest crowds that we have ever heard, and that we recognize that we will be at the center of a not just statewide event, not just a national event, but what is now looking to be like an international event tomorrow in that same area that we're holding right now in the area around Nicollet and Lake. At this time, I'd ask General John Jensen of the Minnesota National Guard to provide his comments.
Good morning, Major General John Jensen. I'm the Adjutant General of the Minnesota National Guard. Just very quickly, I'd like to cover some quick operations that we are involved in currently in Minneapolis. We are currently have escorted and are supporting Minneapolis Fire Department teams on fires. Chicago and Lake and Park, and Nicollet and 31st Street. So we continued our support to the Minneapolis Fire Department that we began yesterday. We also have over 100 soldiers currently at Nicollet Mall between Hyatt Hotel and Grant Street, supporting traffic control points in support of our state highway patrol. This morning at approximately 12:30, I believe, in cooperation and in consultation with Colonel Matt Langer, the commander of the Minnesota State Patrol, the governor authorized the Minnesota National Guard to increase our strength. The initial request was for 1,000 additional soldiers to support the Department of Public Safety and our state highway patrol. Governor Walz and I have looked at different ways that we're going to mobilize this force, and currently what we're going to use are units that would normally report to their normal training this weekend. My belief is that we will exceed the 1,000 mark. As the governor mentioned, this will be the largest deployment inside the state of Minnesota in history. At the conclusion of tomorrow, I believe that we will have over 1,700 soldiers in support of the Department of Public Safety, the city of Minneapolis, and the city of St. Paul. You may have seen or heard that that this evening the president directed the Pentagon to put units of the United States Army on alert to possible operation in Minneapolis. While we were not consulted with as it relates to that, I do believe it's a prudent move to provide other options available for the governor if the governor elects to use those resources. So at this time, Governor, completes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, General Jensen. Thank you, Commissioner. The situation now is the movement of those, and I think Minnesotans who maybe don't understand this, of the force structure we have. Some of this, of course, classified, but where Minnesota soldiers are deployed overseas and in support of missions, and that is a limited force because the National Guard is what it is in states. And when we talk about calling up the National Guard, it's not like pulling something off a shelf and it's there. This is a human being, citizen soldier who's out there working across the state from Roseau to Winona, and they get called in. They need to gather equipment, make their things, put their things in order, report to their armory, staff up, and start understanding where their mission is. So it is not as easy as it might seem. These deployment levels are reaching deployment levels when we deploy overseas in support of Operation Enduring Freedom and some of those types of operations. So the mission remains the same, to restore order, to protect life and property to the best we can. We are in close coordination, other than this move by the White House to do that. And I agree with General Jensen. As I spoke with President Trump the other night, I think it is prudent to have them ready for us to exhaust all resources that we need. And again, General Milley was quite extensive, and we spent quite some time thinking about where those assets are. And they also have to now understand what our federal assets are into an ever-widening situation when we're losing police precincts in Brooklyn and some of this unrest spreading in across the country. So what I would say, Minnesotans, once again, an unprecedented threat to our state, a tragedy that was the catalyst for this, that has morphed into something much different. The challenges of protecting people who are wanting destruction is their goal. No regard to life or property, and no sense of civic pride of who we are. That's what these folks are up against in a quite dangerous environment. So I would once again thank Minnesotans who stayed home. Thanks for looking out for one another. Our goal is to do everything that we can to start to restore order and working with our partners on this. And as I said today, once this became a unified command starting last evening, that's the state of Minnesota in with me. With that, Tom?
Governor, for the second night in a row, hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of Minnesotans and Americans are watching on television as fires burn, buildings are looted, people of Minneapolis in danger, and they don't see the National Guard. They don't see law enforcement. I know you say they're out there, but people are not seeing them, and they're not hearing from their leaders, and it goes on for hours and hours, and nobody knows what is going on. What can you tell me? Are people just missing it on television? Are we missing?
There's simply more of them than us, and the operation is so much broader. We are out there, I can assure you. They are in heated confrontations that are putting folks at risk. We are prioritizing those critical assets, and I know the heartbreak that brings to people when the business that you fought your life for to try and get burns down. That seems like a pretty damn critical asset to you. We're protecting the Federal Reserve. We're protecting those infrastructures downtown. We're protecting power stations and things like that. But they're out there. And as I said, this is the largest single deployment in the state's history. This is certainly not a group that slacks off. These are the best trained in the country. They are war hardened, and they have been out there on many times. As far as National Guard and the police that are out there and the firefighters, it's simply that broad. And we have to prioritize. We have to triage. It is a horrible predicament. I can tell you this, Tom. I want every one of those fires put out immediately. I wished it would not happen. We're trying to use all the tools that we had. Fact of the matter is on this, we ask people, we put a stay-at-home order in, and they don't give one damn about that. And they are out there now to cause as much damage as they can. Our goal is to create the plan that stops us the best we can, to assess, and in this case, assess and bring on those troops.
People seem to completely ignore the 8 o'clock curfew. They did not, for the most part, who were causing the destruction. didn't give it a second thought.
I don't know if surprised. I'm deeply disappointed. I think when you do one of these things, the assessment is the folks who were truly grieving and the folks who have been pent up and wanted to get outside. And there was a sense of somewhat excitement about it when it wasn't there. Our thought was those folks that there would not be casual observers on this. The number who are now here and are continuing to grow here is pretty staggering. So I deeply disappointed. I don't know if surprised, but it's pretty shocking to me, the number that didn't do anything. And I think anytime you do one of these things, you have to be careful that that's not a catalyst in itself. Oh, I'm going to break the curfew because that gives me something to do with that. I talked about this morning. The minute I put someone out there, I mean, these are folks that have made credible threats that the FBI is on of targeting a National Guard soldier and wanting to find glory in killing one of our citizen soldiers. That's the type of person that's out there right now. And that.
Walk us through a timeline. So what was the plan initially? And then if you can address, there were reports, a council member in Minneapolis at one point said the National Guard has been pulled.
That's untrue.
Was the Guard ever redirected back out? Can you explain from the initial plan what then happened?
Yeah, and I'll have General Jensen on this. This is a battle plan of what goes, and most of you know it would be great to execute it perfectly if the folks you were doing against did exactly what you wanted. But the minute you do it, everything changes. And with that goal that was out there and with the sheer numbers that got out there, they have to make real-time movements. And I think this idea that the National Guard is nowhere, they're not back, they are fully engaged the entire time. It is so broad. It is stretched across such a broad area. So, General Jensen, you can talk about it.
So that force that was on Lake Street arrived yesterday morning with the Minnesota State Patrol. They secured their location throughout the day. This evening, in support of the State Patrol, they continued their operations. There came a point this evening where the recommendation from the police officers that they were in direct support of were to leave the area and to leave the area immediately. So they followed those directions and followed their police brothers and sisters out of the area. Our team then went and reoccupied an assembly area where they could, what we would call, reconstitute, reorganize, and prepare for a follow-on mission. The force never left Minneapolis. They remained in Minneapolis, and they have been redirected in support of the Department of Public Safety. The mission I just mentioned on Nicollet is where that force was relocated to, and they remain there.
If I can ask perhaps all three of you this question for, we're hearing reports that it's not only the criminal element that was here the last couple of nights, but now some white supremacists have come to Minnesota and are causing some of the destruction. Can you address, are there white supremacists causing destruction in the city?
Yeah, well, the unconfirmed reports, and again, we're trying to get that, but we've got intel from all the different agencies. Of course, this is where the federal government helps us with some of this. I certainly can't confirm personally on this. My suspicions and what I've seen on this, yes. It gets worse than that. The cartels, who are wondering if it was a break in their drug transmissions, are trying to take advantage of the chaos that's there too. That's why this situation is on a federal level. You're seeing it highly coordinated across the country, so that will happen. And I think this is the conversation we're having with the president, that we're having together here, to be very clear with Minnesotans in the dangerous situation of those who are going to legitimately grieve George Floyd's death are going to gather here. It is a highly volatile situation, and these folks who want to do this blend in. And when you look at those pictures as you see at night, it looks like they're just strolling and 8 o'clock's coming and we'll see if they go home. They didn't come to stroll. They didn't come to go home. They came. And I think asking where the Guard is, how they're responding, think about a rule of engagement in a civilized society where these people have no rules. Their one goal is that destruction, or to hurt or to entice those folks to come in. And our folks are the professionals that is not our intention. Our intention is to restore order. We want them to do nothing more than go home. We don't want them arrested. We don't want to try and have violence on the streets, but that's who they are. So I don't know if John can speak any more on unconfirmed reports, but I think it's very clear by now when you have a situation like this across the country, elements that want to do that are certainly gathering. And then they are professionals on some of the, like John said, we're seeing evidence of a pretty sophisticated attempt to cause problems.
Governor, do you have any other?
Oops, I'm sorry. John,
We'll come back. Drug cartels.
We've got intel reports that have been confirmed, but I cannot say that we have confirmed observations of local law enforcement to say that we've seen cells of white supremacists in the area. We got reports of that over the last couple of days that we were tracking in terms of threats to some of the critical infrastructure, threats to the National Guard and others. But I don't have confirmed reports that I can give you at this point. Speaking to the governor's point, we also, from some national sources, also got reports on drug cartels that were directing their resources to restore their drug markets in some of the areas that had been looted and some of the businesses that had been operated by them. We're still trying to work through that, but frankly, that's at best a secondary or tertiary concern as we're trying to deal with right now life and death situations on the street.
Governor, this is a question for both you and the mayor. We just spent the entire evening in Minneapolis in some extremely volatile situations, and the question in every single neighborhood was why it took 3.5 hours to even attempt to enforce the curfew with thousands of people in the streets.
I don't know. And I would go back to the United States first of all. The sheer volume of this, you're right, thousands of people. To detain one person, it's not as if they're going to walk up and let you do it. To detain one person in a volatile environment, that the minute you turn your back, the other ones are throwing bottles of urine, in some cases firing weapons, takes, John can talk about this, several folks. You've got to get them on a vehicle and you've got to transport them out of there. It is a heavy, heavy lift to do so. One of the things, like so many of these things, and we talked about with COVID-19, no, if people decide not to do it, can you arrest everybody? No, there's not enough people to do it. And on this one, there are not enough law enforcement. Think about this. This is the largest concentration of law enforcement in the history of Minnesota, and it is not enough. So I'll talk to John about it.
So, Minnesota State Patrol, Minneapolis, St. Paul, all have been attempting to enforce the curfew. The issue has been, as the governor described, a tactical issue. As we looked at crowds reaching 35W and had to make a decision, do we leave our posts that we had assigned and had in consultation with Minneapolis and St. Paul been designated as critical infrastructure posts that they wanted to make sure that they were not breached and they were not lost? You had to make a decision as to, of the mobile assets that you had, where do you put them and where can they be effective? And as General Jensen said, when we looked at the Lake Street east of Hiawatha area, as we began to try and look to how would we enforce the curfew in that area, it quickly became apparent that with several thousand people that were in civil disobedience mode, that we did not have, with 150 or 200 mobile field force folks, the adequate staff to be able to do that, which is dictated pulling people back out of what looked to be an area where they were going to be encircled, potentially assaulted and injured. So we then regrouped and then made some tactical decisions about where could we be most effective with the resources we had. So you identify targets that were where do we have people, where is the disruption, where are there battles that we can engage with. We made the decision that we would go in and do mass arrests, and so we have started to do that. But that is also, once again, that process. You push the crowd, you make your orders, you hold your line, then you have to have an arrest team that can do that. That arrest team then is tied up booking and processing, and you have to then reconstitute that group, reorganize, and then move to the next target, which is what we have done now.
So my follow-up question to that would be that if you underestimated or didn't know that there were going to be that many people on the streets tonight, what made you believe that after 4 nights of what we've seen, the precinct burning down last night, this constant chaos, why was it underestimated and why wasn't that assistance there? Why weren't the numbers there?
I would say that we underestimated it in part because we listened to many members who said that decisions that were made today, activities that we had made today, would reduce the number of individuals who would be on the streets tonight by a significant number. Clearly, that information and the information that we based our decisions on turned out to be wrong. Quite clearly, the numbers weren't just a little bit larger than they had been the night before when we were able to effectively move and clear out a wide swath of Lake Street. The numbers not only got to be bigger, they got to be more aggressive, and they were less concentrated than they had been in previous nights, where we had been focused principally just on the Lake Street and 3rd Precinct area in previous nights. We now had 35W. We now had downtown Minneapolis. We knew that we had issues up on the north side of Minneapolis, and as I said earlier, we also still have to do the work that's happening on the St. Paul side of the line. And St. Paul has actively been engaged with our folks and with the National Guard, holding their own there. So part of this is you look at what your numbers are, you look at what you believe the threat profile is, and you look at what you have been able to do in the past. And we underestimated both the numbers and we underestimated the tactics. We had not seen individuals in these crowds fire upon officers. We had seen some shootings, but it had not been directed toward officers, and that changed the dynamics incredibly by making just moving in with a mobile field force far more dangerous and far more fraught as we began to decide how would we move forward. And we're still moving forward, but we recognize that now we have to worry about we're going to take fire as we continue to try and take back Lake Street.
If I could talk about these numbers too, I think this is really important for Minnesotans, and this is a responsibility that I need to make. The one thing is, I think if you're not involved with these numbers, there's a belief, just bring overwhelming force. Just bring everybody there. What are you holding back for? We've got about 650 Minnesota State Patrol across there. When you're operating a force, not all of them can be up at the same time. Some of them have to be sleeping. Some are the ones providing the return. We can use every single, which we are, Minnesota State Trooper, and it dwarfs the numbers that are out there. It is not as if that it is an unlimited number and you're making a bad mistake about not putting everybody in there. There are other operations that have to happen. These people will now, and they will be smart, and in everything that's happening, they will move once it happens. They will move elsewhere. They will move to the suburbs if they see that happen. So you have to keep that force in there. That's why the consultation with the federal government. That's why the consultation with fellow governors. But now many of them, and even the federal government, are starting to think, how are we going to deploy those assets into other places once they see this unrest? So I think it's important to Minnesotans. It's not for lack of planning. It was not a want, and weren't you ready for this? Yes, and we put a force on the ground when I asked them. This is larger than anything that has ever been deployed, with the most qualified troops on there, and you're still seeing people say, where are they? Where are they? There is a finite number of folks that can go out there. That's why we have to and I think about it with these people. So we just say everything is locked down. If you walk out of your house in the morning, you're going to be there. They will still be there tomorrow night. They do not care. They do not care. And so that's the problem that we're solving. And I would tell Minnesotans on this, with that being the case, and it's a tough one, we have a responsibility to solve it. We have the responsibility to figure this out. That is the next move that we're making with the National Guard. That is the moves that we will start thinking and talking about and have tonight about this plan for tomorrow. Tom.
Governor Wolf didn't realize Mayor Fry was not going to state questions. In retrospect, I know you were not on board with the decision apparently to abandon the third precinct the other night. Did that have the effect of emboldening the protesters again tonight? And did it change the tactics you used to protect the 5th precinct in terms of not abandoning that when it was under?
Yeah, and I think this is a good time. I think I want to make sure that in critiquing on this and today of being asked questions, my intent is not to critique the decision that Mayor Fry made. The criticisms about these decisions, especially after last night, as we talked about that being a pivot point, those criticisms they end with me. And the situation as it came out, with that being said, yes, I think so. I don't think you can have this. And we heard people people talking about you can't allow this to happen. The way I understand, it happened in New York City is what they're trying to do. So yes, I think you have to hold these. They're one thing, they're important strategic positions, but it is a psychological effect. These are folks that are trying to, and chaos. Those fires burning out there and people being scared and the governor of Minnesota standing here at 2 a.m. makes them as happy as anything can be. That's the goal. Our goal is to provide peace and security and a decent life for people they don't care about. Yep.
Why wait to accept the help offered by President Trump if it looks like even calling up 1,000 more troops isn't going to be enough? You're so vast outnumbered. Why not tell him tonight, yes, we'll take them, and try to put an end to this?
We are talking about it, and I think one of the things is that what that number looks like, that's what we're trying to understand. I want to be clear with everyone, it is not and again, resources and things like that, it is not a small step going back to Insurrection Act of Posse Comitatus about having federal forces on land. Now, with that being said, it's simply irresponsible not to look at all sources that are there. So this is not about a resistance to using that. It's about understanding what are the checks and balances in terms of what are you going to get by doing this. You imagine federal military army folks on it. These folks want that fight. Now, if this ends with a massive presence and a conflict with folks who are trying to bring that is not bringing back order. So we're assessing it. General Jensen, I don't know if you want to say anything about how we look at this. We are not denying them. We're looking at it. We're assessing if this is enough. I have to, again, be candid with all of you. We're looking at doubling the size of the force of putting people on there. And my assessment with my team and looking at the numbers and what's going to happen tomorrow is to decide, is that enough? And that's what's happening right now, Tom. And the answer might be no.
It sounds like you anticipate this going on for many days, not just over the weekend.
Well, it certainly could. I think it would be irresponsible again not to plan for that. Our hope is that we can start to get that. This is where I need the public. I need those legitimate folks who are grieving to take this back for the right reason. Why are we talking about anarchists who are burning down damn buildings that were businesses that were built up by our indigenous and black communities? Instead of talking about, we had a horrific situation where a police officer murdered and was charged for the death of a black man. We've lost that in there. And I need the public, I need them to rise up. I need to know they're madder than hell, but we have got to stop this piece first to get the other. So